Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Cal's webinar, where we will discuss the changing dynamics within the fertilizer industry, which of course has seen quite a volatile environment over the last 2 years. This is Cal's first webinar for the year 2023, and we are fortunate to have with us three prominent industry experts who have a collective experience of over 50 years within this agri-fertilizer and agrochemicals industries. To introduce the panelists, first we have Mr. Pasad Girasekara. Mr. Pasad currently functions as the Managing Director of Agstar PLC. He was a founding director of Agstar, serving as the head of finance and then as the chief operating officer. He has over 30 years of industry experience, and he's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants UK and a fellow member of the Chartered Global Management Accountants, a fellow of the Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka, and a fellow of the Institute of the Public Accountants in Australia. We also have with us Mr. Varuna Madavanarachchi. Mr. Varuna currently serves as the Managing Director of the CIC Agribusiness. He previously held the position of Deputy Director of Agriculture, Seed and Planting Material Division at the Department of Agriculture in Sri Lanka. He was also an Assistant Lecturer in Agroeconomy, Faculty of Agriculture at the University of Rohana. Mr. Varuna is also a graduate of the University of Peradeniya and Mississippi State University in USA. We also have with us as our third panelist, Mr. Nishantha Jayamana. He currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer of Lankem Agro. He has more than 27 years of experience in the agrochemicals business, covering all functional areas, including sales, marketing, research, as well as production. He is a graduate of the University of Peradeniya and University of Colombo, and also holds a postgraduate diploma from the Chartered Institute of Marketing UK. Welcome, everyone, and we are extremely happy to have you with us today. To the audience, just want to remind you that there will be an open Q&A session towards the end of this discussion. So if you'd like to pose any questions to the panelists, please send it within the chat box to the Capital Alliance account, and we will be happy to direct them to the panelists. As we begin this discussion, I think it's important to really talk about the background of the industry, because we have seen it making several regulatory changes and also changes within the market as well as the global context over the last couple of years. The implementation of the ban, the removal of it, and how global commodities have also moved, and particularly with the economic crisis and what we've seen kind of play out over the last 6 to 8 months or so. But I think there's a lot more that kind of to this than really meets the eye. So if I could just start off with and pose this question to you, Mr. Varuna, but if anyone else also has any insights, please feel free to add in. Just start with some background. If you can give us an idea, what were the main real restrictions or regulatory restrictions existing prior to 2022 and 2021 within the fertilizer industry, particularly towards the private sector? What of these have really been removed? What has been changed? And are there still any persisting restrictions that you see within the industry that are still kind of continuing to this day?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Yeah, I think let me go back to 2018 when the government introduced this quota system in fertilizer, because 2016 and 17 we had open market situation, and then government again introduced the subsidy scheme in 2018, I think somewhere around May, and introduced along with the subsidy the quota system. So under the quota system, private sector, I think private sector was handling the non-paddy sector and the government handled the paddy sector. So private sector was given a quota at the beginning of the year, so that within that quota we operated. So that continued till 2021 when this ban came into the effect in 21 April, May. So that I think about 6-7 months the ban continued. And again, I think in November, somewhere in November, government lifted the ban, and now the fertilizer industry is more or less open. But you know what happened in 2022 with the restriction in the foreign exchange and country's situation, and also the supply chain disruptions, market prices, there were restriction in imports. So technically 2023, I think is a more kind of a free market situation. But still, I mean, from regulatory viewpoint, we don't have any restrictions. So we can import fertilizer under the Fertilizer Act. But still, there are some restrictions in terms of the opening of LC, some because of the country's economic situation. Some banks are still not accepting. So other than that, I think this is more or less a free market operating, and there are several newcomers, non-traditional players have come to the trade, join the trade, and gradually, I think with the easing of the forex situation is gradually coming back to normalcy. So, but it may take some more months for the real supply situation to restore. So that is, I think, basically the background, and there are no restrictions from regulatory viewpoint.
But in addition to that, the issue of government getting cargo at different prices and being issued free to farmers and at concessionary prices, which will continue, I think, even in Yala. So that could create some kind of not free play. And these cargoes could be going all over because it is not the market price.
True, yeah, I think we can expect because the government may continue to give some assistance to the staple food, I mean the paddy sector. So that I think hopefully it will continue for some time, and yeah, we can expect because a lot of pressure coming, the purchasing power of the farmers and so on and so forth. So there can be some, yeah, I agree with you that in paddy sector particularly, there are some government, what do you call, some assistance. But definitely, yes, that is spill over to the other sectors affecting the open market business.
I think Trisha added to Varna and Prasad. I see that there's a small restriction imposed recently regarding organic liquid fertilizer. So I think they have brought in a new restriction that we cannot bring in organic liquid fertilizer. That's the recent one. I don't think there would be a big impact on the paddy sector and the tea sector like that. But I feel, but still they are regarding, in particularly for TSP, the threshold level of cadmium is 3 ppm nowhere in the world, I guess. That is the most strictest threshold that they have imposed on. So this has to be, I think, revisited in my view. They have to impose the TSP to the country in the near future. So this has to be revisited and looked upon very seriously. So this is my view.
Sorry, Mr. Nishant, just to clarify, is that a restriction in terms of imports of TSP, or is it with regard to the price, which I think I saw in terms of a government trying to implement a gazette on that?
Not regarding to the price, particularly the specifications, the quality parameters. That is regarding particularly the heavy metals in TSP, right? One of the component of heavy metals, there's a threshold limit, very difficult to comply, and elsewhere in the world, it's more relaxed threshold. So this has to be, looked at critically going forward. Yeah.
Understood. So just with regard to, I think the first point Mr. Barren raised, which was that the quota system has been taken off. How do you kind of really see this affecting particularly the private sector going forward? I think because we were functioning under that system, there was not as much space to grow. How do you see this kind of changing in the next, not just in the next year, but beyond that as well? Maybe Mr. Prasad, if you can take that question.
Actually, the opening up is good, so that there will be more competition. One side, other side, there will be more customers oriented services being introduced, which again the customers will benefit, because otherwise the customer becomes number two when there is a restriction and imports. So that is good, and also more players coming in will again create more competition and the thing. But the issue is, say, with the restrictions and interest being so expensive, the sustainability of it will be the long-term issue.
So do you see, for example, I think previously the volumes annually for fertilizer imports at least were around 800 to 1 million metric tons annually, whereas last year this was significantly lower, if I'm not mistaken, around 300,000 or so. Do you see this kind of picking up this year? I think there were also tying into the fact that prices were quite high last year, and that also made it difficult along with the dollar liquidity problems. Do you see that normalizing this year, or is that more of a longer term impact we might see?
I don't think the 100% recovery will happen this year. It will be a marginal increase, if at all. And also because the world market prices coming down also will help somewhat to recover. But it will be hopefully 2024 the onwards kind of situation. But the 800,000 that you mentioned was purely based on a subsidy given and the farmer getting the bag at 1,500 rupees or 1,000 or whatever. So, but in a normal setup, if you take large number of years back, roughly the volume should be 500 to 600,000 was the normal volume with a normal setup. So 800,000 is due to the price being lower and the lot of incentives being given for applying fertilizer.
So would it be kind of correct to assume that the normalized level of fertilizer that Sri Lanka at least needs is around 500,000 annually?
You cannot say it, but the economic reasons and cash flow reasons, the people usage will be roughly 500 to 600,000. It is not the requirement or recommendation, but generally the
Right. I think I'll also kind of dive into in terms of the volume aspect of things. There is a question in terms of whether the government can adequately supply enough fertilizer to the industry within this year. I think the last intake that they had was with help from certain multilateral agencies. Do you see this being a possibility that the government can kind of continue to provide volumes to the market? Or do you think the private sector has the ability to fulfill the market requirement as needed, and if needed, to fulfill the entire market's requirement as well? Mr. Nishanta?
On mute.
Mr. Nishanta, you're on mute.
Yeah. So I think earlier it was actually the paddy sector was served entirely by the government. If you see in terms of share of the total market, it's roughly around 50 to 60%. So I mean, if it is open for the private sector, I believe that private sector could take it up that entire segment going forward. So as Prasad said, of course the prices are dropping. If at all, then I think the affordability is the issue down the line by the farmers end. The demand has come down, the market has shrunk. So in that context, definitely private sector should be able to deliver or cater for that demand.
So just kind of talking about the pricing and affordability aspect of that as well, Mr. Nishant, just to get into it. Of course, there was a very steep increase that we saw last year. Is what the prices that are going at right now, if you could provide some color into that, do you think it's a kind of more sustainable level? Do you think farmers can afford it? And is there a possibility that prices could adjust a little bit further as well to provide for affordability that will then stabilize volumes?
No, put it in summary, earlier in subsidized rates, the farmers got it at 500 rupees or 1,500 rupees at 50 kg bag. If you see now, it's around 15,000 to 20,000 rupees, 1:15 times. Of course, in terms of cost of production, the pricing, what we are in the market, still farmers can earn a profit out of it. But as you very correctly said, the affordability is a big question. Affordability is a big question. Or there are farmers who spend around 40,000 rupees on fertilizer per acre. So there's a question mark. If you see the last season, most of the farmers couldn't afford to have their fertilizers for their health. That is the fact. So we see now the information we get from field is so alarming that yields are going to drop drastically. So they have not basically applied the required fertilizer. Number one, of course, they couldn't afford the required fertilizer. So I mean, there should be a price correction, or the price has to come down if this is going to sustain. The paddy cultivation is going to sustain.
Mr. Barren, if I can kind of just again kind of dig into that a little bit, in terms of this volume pickup, as Mr. Nishanta is mentioning, affordability is still a problem, right? So seeing that volume ramp up might be a little bit slower. How do you kind of see this playing out over the next kind of, if I were to say, a 3-year horizon? Do you see also our global conditions conducive for bringing down pricing enough to be affordable for the local farmers?
Yeah, I think this, as Prasad explained, I think this 800, 900,000 was a bit, fertilizer was given almost free. So now farmers will have to pay a price. So with that, I think the people will again will go for more judicious use. And also the technology should come here, because these are chemical fertilizers, and there must be some portion of organic too should be incorporated. I'm talking about real organic, right? There are a lot of pseudo organics going around. So that is one side. The farmers again will get into more judicious use of costly fertilizer. That is one. The other thing is, now all what we are talking about is 800,000, but those are conventional old generation of fertilizer. Now there are more advanced formulations available all over the world. So those, I think, eventually those are more environmentally friendly, and those kind of technology will evolve with time, and we can see some of the informal sector. I mean, there's an informal sector in agri, so that sector will shrink in future because of the subsidy withdrawal, and more commercial farmers will get into agriculture. So they will go for more technology, more advanced formulations, and so on. So it's a kind of a mix, conventional fertilizers as well as first generation, second generation. So those technology will eventually come. So that is my guess.
Mr. Prasad, if I was to kind of pose the same question to you in terms of what you would be expecting in terms of the volume kind of increase that you would see going forward, and how you kind of would expect that, and as if you can also kind of talk into the organic fertilizer side of things with your experience as well, in terms of how that mix can actually really be perfected or made a lot more efficient for the Sri Lankan market.
So generally the recommendation worldwide is a combination of the two. But unfortunately we went one side stopping the other. and subsequently has come back with at present in paddy 30-70 kind of arrangement. But in between, because for the farmers to put the 70, they simply don't have the money. So as a result, we have ended up with a say no-go kind of a situation at present. So say now the issue is with this whole arrangement, say real organic farmers also are lost because they have got fed up of this organic. So now everybody is lost with not knowing what they're supposed to do. So when it comes to the fertilizer part of it, roughly the long time back when the government was giving the fertilizer for say 1,500 rupees a bag, the cost would have been about 3,500, 4,000 rupees a bag, and the government gave at that price. So because of the exchange and all those things, and plus the world market prices, now the prices are very much higher. So the issue is some time back the fertilizer price would have been 35,000 to 40,000 rupees a bag, which has come down to now the 15 to 20,000 levels, which will further go down hopefully to about 10,000 to 15,000 levels. So, but still, for a farmer who has been buying 1,500 rupees, it is quite a jump. And also when farmer has gone through three seasons of disaster, whether they have really, even though it is economical and all those things, whether they have cash available for them to buy it is the big issue, which I think Madhavanarch will also agree. Even the use of seed paddy and other things also have drastically gone down because people simply don't have the money in their hand.
Kind of just to touch on the more global side, Mr. Prasad, as you mentioned, I mean, global prices are coming down. How easy is it? I think if I can actually pose it to all three of you, I think depending on your company, it can vary as well. How easy is it to kind of transfer these price benefits or these cost benefits to the local farmers? Is what kind of a lag do you expect to be seeing in terms of being able to price that downwards as well? And if you can just kind of broadly talk about the global dynamics that are kind of realizing in this easing of prices.
Generally, the main item, if you take urea, say, I think it would have gone up to $1,100, $1,300, which today has come below 50% of what it was. So, but the only thing is, say, the time lag between the prices changing and which will get reflected in Sri Lanka, at least there will be about 2 months to 3 months gap. Because especially because if any company imports reasonable large quantity, the uptake at present is comparatively slow. So as a result, the real price which is in the market today getting reflected into Sri Lanka, at least there will be a 2 months gap.
Yeah, if I can ask Mr. Nishank as well, in your perspective, how do you see this?
As I said, there will be a time lag when the price is being reflected in our market. But having said that, the market is now open, and the pressure is for the main company, those who are holding stocks and those who have bought at higher prices. So that has happened now, even currently. The prices are dropping and prices are being corrected, and a lot of inventories are being carried by major players. So there is a price correction gradually taking place in the market. It is inevitable. So when the world market drops, I mean, definitely there is no restriction for a new player to come in to this market. There's no entry barriers. So of course, there is a drop in price, a player could bring it. And definitely we'll have to all the players in the existing market has to face for that. So definitely there will be a price correction. It so happened during the last couple of months. So it's now trading at, if you see urea, a 50 kg bag now trading at 13,000, 40,000. There would have been companies who have brought the same material at cost around 30,000 rupees. So I mean, so is a process. Sometimes you have to source it again at the lower price, and you have to average it out, and then the market correction will gradually happen. So this is the phenomena I believe would happen in the coming few months. Going forward, maybe a couple of 3 to 4 months, the prices should be corrected.
Mr. Parna, just in terms of the global dynamics, if you please correct me if I'm wrong, from what I understand, I mean, of course, the Ukraine-Russia crisis led to that very sharp escalation in global prices, but right now what has brought it down is more of a demand contraction. Do you think this is kind of more sustainable? Do you see prices coming down further? And what are the risks you see, particularly on the global front, for global prices to go back up again and kind of cause a little bit of volatility again in the domestic market?
Well, I think the most common fertilizer kind is the urea. The prices it has come down to almost the previous level, what we saw in 2018-19. So it is a Sri Lankan rupee depreciation that now the price. So if there is a local currency appreciation, so there will be definitely a price reduction. But internationally, with all these energy crises, I doubt it very much whether the prices will come, except maybe things like TSP. But urea prices are more or less it has come down. So I know it's very difficult to speculate, but now the freight cost has come down. So things are gradually normalizing. So it may come down a little bit, but not. I don't think it will go back to the previous levels. Like when the last open market situation, we were selling around 3,000, 3,500 rupees a bag, 50 kilo bag. I don't think price will ever come to that level, but the price will stabilize maybe around 10,000, 12,000, that level. But again, I think one area that I like to highlight that the productivity. You see now paddy, of course, we are okay, but are we getting the correct productivity in this country? So that is something that technology has to come, because fertilizer alone is not going to solve the issue. Fertilizer, yes, you need fertilizer. But then the judicious use, new generation of fertilizer, new technologies. So that kind of agriculture should evolve. I think it's going to evolve in an open market situation, unless again, the government come and mess around with subsidies, and if it allowed to operate the open market, I think the things will evolve eventually. So that is my guess. I think while we're talking about high cost of inputs, other side, what about our productivity? Are we reaching the correct productivity level? So that, when you get the higher productivity, naturally the cost of production, unit cost will come down. So those are the areas that as agriculture companies, we must bring it to the table, that, new technologies.
Thanks, Mr. Varuna. Actually, if I'm actually to lead with that question, just in terms of the strategies, if you are able to kind of talk about it a little bit more openly, of course, the private sector has, I think, been able to open up a lot going forward. How are your companies individually kind of preparing for this ramp up? And also, I think very specifically, as Mr. Barren brought up, in terms of technology, what are the changes you're seeing both in the industry in terms of the farmers, but also in terms of your individual kind of service or product offerings? How do you see that kind of really evolving, and what do you think is going to be kind of a game changer within that industry that you can bring forward in the next couple of years? Mr. Nishant, would you like to begin?
Of course, yes. I think we have seen that in a known fact that there's a high wastage in urea and other fertilizers, state fertilizers are being used. In particularly, if you see urea, there are data to say that 30 to 40% is lost. So as a company that we have made plans to, address this problem by way of, studying through it and bring in a kind of a solution for that. We have one little farm, and we have done certain kind of research, and we are in the verge of finding a solution for that. As well as maybe the coming months or perhaps in the next year, we'll be able to give a more advanced kind of a fertilizer instead of urea, or maybe improved version of that, so that we can address the issue of the productivity, as Mr. Barren said. So, of course, internally we are doing a lot of focus. I have made focus into study into this. And also in terms of farm, I think they will move away from traditional or the conventional fertilizers. We want to improve the productivity. That knowledge, that know-how has to be transferred, or the extension has to be done to greater extent to take this new novel technologies today. That is what I believe.
Mr. Prasad, what about from Agstar's perspective? How would you kind of prepare for this next cycle?
The key is will be that the fertilizer, because of the cost being so high, the usage has to be controlled. So from the group point of view, I would say our group is working with nanotechnology institute to come out with develop formula so that the usage can be drastically reduced, especially when it comes to urea.
Mr. Barren, what about from CIC's angle?
Yeah, I think we are trialing out some new products, and we also in the process of manufacturing kind of we call it organominerals, like chemical and organic mix. So those kind of research are going on, and of course, yes, that there are some research going on in the local universities, nanotechnology institute, how to improve the efficiency of costly fertilizer. And then I think as agriculture companies that we also should introduce this techno kind of marketing, that to advisory services to supplement the government extension service. So that I think that we have a role to play there. So yeah, I mean, all in all, that new technology now, we have seen what is happening in the nearby countries, Thailand and India and Indonesia. So those things, and gradually the technology, we saw that one company is now set up I mean, the shop in Dambul, where they used some drones to apply chemicals. So those kind of new technology, environmentally friendly technologies should come in. So that role, the private sector has to take a lead role. I mean, so far it was the government that was providing more kind of technical advice, but eventually I can see some of these companies will come up with good advisory services and introduce more technology to local agriculture. What we can see, not in the most developed countries, but in the neighboring countries, you can see the technology is being used. So that I think as a sector, we are, I mean, compared to other two sectors, we are backward. So we got to upgrade, I mean, our sector to get the more best out of these scarce inputs and then improve the productivity. So that direction, I think we are working on that direction.
I think in terms of the business as a whole, it's of course a very seasonal business, right? I mean, you're dealing with essentially nature and how cycles work within that as well. Is there a way, if you could actually touch on, Mr. Varuna, if you could just touch on in terms of the seasonality and how you see that both in terms of revenue perspective and volume perspective, and is there a way that kind of tying up technology within that can make it a little bit more of a less seasonal business, or kind of take away that amount of volatility away, at least in the longer run, and how you can see that playing out?
Yeah, true. I think you correctly said that we have the seasonality in production. We have gluts and leans, right? During the glut season, the prices crash down. I mean, beet or tomato or pumpkin, and then after 2-3 months, the price skyrockets, right? So affecting the consumers. But there are technologies, so that is why I said that the year-round cultivation. Of course, as a country, we're a smaller country, but still there are. I mean, we can grow in grow structures. So those kind of things will come. Technology will come. So that's what I meant by technology. And then the year-round production is quite feasible. But there again, I think that we have the variety of crops, not only paddy. So tea is more or less year-round production, right? So likewise, now I mean, some time back we had some seminars organized with this Protected Agriculture Association, where people are moving in, young entrepreneurs are moving into those cultivation. So then, of course, when you use the technology, then you don't have to depend on the environment. I mean, those are grown in the protected environment. So the outside environment impact is almost zero. So those things are there, and then of course other perennials like coconut, and so those are year-round production. But basically, the paddy is, I mean, it is conventionally it is seasonal. It will continue to do so. But other crops, there are some areas, there are new areas coming into production. So you must assure that year-round production comes, so that the supply chain will continue uninterrupted.
If I was to kind of just ask a little bit of a harder question within that, how far away do you think Sri Lanka is from kind of achieving that kind of, or reaching that kind of technological advancement in terms of ensuring that businesses such as yours are going to see less impact in terms of your top lines as well as bottom lines from these kind of fluctuations by using technology? How far away do you think that is?
No, it's not that far away. That's what I said, that unless somebody come and mess around again, right? If if you allow the open market competition, I mean open market situation, things will evolve. What happened when all of a sudden we try to turn this country into organic. So you see the repercussions. So all these policies, the state policies should be consistent. So if the policies are consistent, people are confident, and then the investors and the companies, so we can invest. Otherwise, we are also very skeptical. So all what we need is good policies and consistent policies. So that's what we want. So then, of course, there are enough talent in this country. I mean, it's a lot of talents, lot of youngsters. So agriculture, again, should be just like any other business. I mean, just a return on investment. So those who can invest and get a better return will continue. So otherwise, I mean, others naturally will just move out. So that is going to happen in an open kind of environment. So as a company, I think I'm very optimistic that we are willing to invest, and hopefully I'm very optimistic that things will. We are not that far. I mean, it's bringing technologies is there in a doorstep that already. I mean, just a couple of hours of flying, you can see these things happening in your nearby country. So it's very soon it will come. Unless there are interference, the unnecessary policies, the restriction, over-regulation, those things should come to a stop, right? And they should believe in the private sector. And I mean, private sector alone, I don't think we need. We have to work with the government, and they have the more trained people. So it's a kind of a more corporate, I mean, this private-public kind of cooperation that can drive this country out of this mess.
Mr. Nishant?
Yeah. As you said, for the seasonality issue on agriculture, the solution would be vegetable segment, either controlled environment agriculture or the protected agriculture. We see the government and government is supporting for that. If you see the central part of the country, Kandy, Noli, Valimata, Bandar, a lot of polytunnels have been put up. The young farmers, they're embracing this technology. We can't say they are behind. Of course, that is happening. Even the companies, we have made plans to expand into production. Why investing on these types of controlled environment agriculture? So that is being fastly embraced, and that technology is there already in the country. I think what is needed is, kind of support from the government, the regulators, all the stakeholders to promote this and facilitate. Then of course the farmers will take it up. So the solution is that the controlled environment agriculture going forward for vegetable segment.
Thank you both very much. Just one more thing, I was just thinking in terms of this industry, of course, one thing I think that is a lot less seasonal is in terms of agrochemical weedicides and things like that. Of course, the removal of the ban on glyphosate, how does that kind of change things? And maybe I think Ms. Nishanta might be the best person to ask on this in terms of that. How does that change things?
I'm delighted. I'm very appreciative on that bold decision made by the government. It's a long-awaited decision. And we have the impact on that, very severe, right around all the sectors of agriculture. So I think definitely we could bounce back. Weed is a big menace. If you don't control the weeds, your harvest is lost around 30 to 40%. So that if you just calculate the output and factoring the loss that we are going to make without the proper weedicide, I mean, it has a great impact on our agriculture. And so glyphosate is one of the cheapest solutions we have to control weeds. So we were not having that till 2050. And after 7 years, now we are going to get for all the segment of the cultivation. Then of course there was some restricted use in tea cultivation, but now they have given approvals to be used in other sectors as well. So I learned that there were approved so far around 600,000 liters to be brought in. Of course, the companies have applied to bring around 600,000. Of course, they have given a block approval by the government of 2.2 million liters for next yellow season as well as the March season. Hopefully, I think we should be able to bring in and support the agriculture. So that is one of the cheapest way of controlling weeds. You name it, whether it is paddy, whether it is tea, whether it is rubber, coconut, or any other vegetable for the land preparation. And so, of course, you need to apply glyphosate. This is a total weed killer. So, unless otherwise, you can't establish your crop. So, weeds take away all the nutrients, the water, and everything. So, it will have a great impact on all the harvest and the crops. So, I think it's a good decision, a bold decision made by the government to allow glyphosate to come in. I think science should prevail. So what had happened in the past was science was not outspoken and it was not based in decision making. So that was one of the drawbacks in our system. So I think we need to inculcate the science-based decision making. Especially in products like pesticides and fertilizers and going such equipment. So I think it's a good decision. I think the benefit will reach by our farmers predominantly, and it will help us improving our cultivations and the harvest, and it will enable ultimately the food security of our country as well. So this is my view.
Mr. Nishant, sorry, yeah. Mr. Prasad, you have something to add on it as well?
No, I'm fine with it.
Mr. Nishant, just to kind of understand in terms of the market dynamics, I think it's a little bit different from the fertilizer industry. Is it is it dominated by certain larger players, or is it also a little bit more fragmented in that sense? Do you see a lot more interest coming from smaller players trying to get into this now that the ban has been reversed?
No, I think this is a highly regulated business. Of course, there are few entry barriers in the sense you need to have the resource and the capacity to handle such products. Those are not technical products. You need to have the human resource, the capabilities, and so on and so forth. So it's a kind of a techno-commercial marketing. You need to have the right people, you need to have the right knowledge, and you need to have the agricultural background to sell these products. So there's some technical. You need to convey that to the farmers how when to apply, how to apply, when to be used, how to diagnose the pest and diseases. If you don't diagnose the correct way, then it's a disaster, right, in this industry. So that competence or the competent people should be there. So there are now, of course, entry barriers into this industry. There are a few players. Of course, there are 28 companies being registered. But of course, the regulators looking how for the capability of the persons or the companies who are handling these products, whether they are capable to handle this kind of products and whether they have technical know-how to handle such products. So I don't think anyone could easily come into this business, but the players who are there, of course, very conversant and competent in handling this business. Even the dealers, they have to obtain a license from the regulators to market these products. So you need to have, you're supposed to go through a training program about 3 to 6 months and obtain this license. So you can't just open an outlet and market pesticide per se. So it's, of course, is a highly regulated process and a business. So, and there's a lot of technical know-how need to be acquired and disseminated down the line from maybe the dealers towards the farmers and even the companies and the stakeholders handling this business. So I don't think it's very easy to get into this business. And all these are licensed items and highly monitored items. And in terms of toxicology, you need to submit a lot of dossiers, and you have to evaluate products around a couple of seasons, 3 seasons before you market it. And the Department of Agriculture needs to do trials for 3 seasons and evaluate a technical dossier before giving approval to market it. And even if it is so, if there's an issue, they will recall the products or they will restrict the products. So there is a lot of scrutiny in this business, and it's a normal person cannot handle it. There should be persons capable of handling this business. That is why it's limited to few companies, few players, I would say, and you can't easily come in. If you're coming, of course, you have to prove your case that you are capable of handling such products in the market.
Thanks, Mr. Shankar. Just before I move into questions from the audience, and we've already seen a few coming in, if I was to just kind of tie it a little bit together, Mr. Prasad, how do you see this impact of the glyphosate ban coming off, as well as volumes kind of changing, or the increase in volumes at least compared to 2021, when the fertilizer ban was in effect, and going forward? What impact do you see this having in terms of yields, vegetables wise, in terms of tea, in terms of rice cultivation? How do you see that changing? If you can kind of give an insight to maybe the next season and then the seasons after that as well.
The product availability improvement is gradually happening, and I think the fertilizer at present is, I think, quite available all over, and the agrochemical has followed. So the availability, I think, is up to a point available. But the biggest problem that is having is the farmers' cash availability, and say, can they afford to apply the fertilizer or the agrochemical? So that is the issue that is there. So till such time that gets corrected, whether that will immediately have an impact on the yield, and that is the issue. So I think it will take a little bit of more time for the farmers to get adjusted to the situation, because say the value of fertilizer or agrochemical is quite expensive from what they have ever seen. So, and I think even the paddy prices, which went to almost 140 rupees, has come back to say 80, 90 or whatever. So whether the farmer could afford to spend this amount of money for whatever we are selling, and whether they have, even though they are willing, whether they have adequate cash in their hand to use is the issue. So I think it is on a positive note, but how long it will take to get it to adjusted to a acceptable level will be the issue. But from the company's point of view, yes, we will sell, I think, hopefully larger, we will have a larger turnover, larger quantities. But say more people importing, there will be more competition on them to grab because the cake will be smaller than what it was, and there is more people trying to eat the cake. So there will be more competition. So the margin could have a certain amount of impact, and also when the world market prices keeps on going on one way, lower and lower, that also could have an impact. Say you can have some stocks with you which you will have to say sell at sometimes even a loss to get out of the stocks. So those could be issues when the prices are going down and down. So further adding to Mr. Vadavaranachi, the issue is the Sri Lankan people and the companies, everybody will have the capacity. But the issue is, like, for example, the government will spend and through aid or whatever will promote, say, greenhouses or tunnels and those kind of things. Suddenly they on the other side, they will come and say, the inputs needed for those is no longer available. So say the consistency of these policies and one having a link on the other is not understood sometimes. So the sometimes 3-4 years of effort by government plus the private sector is totally lost over a small decision which is taken, and by the time they realize that a number of years effort is totally lost. So the consistency of government policy and having a long-term view of things and not adjusting things on a day-to-day basis is very important, because otherwise everybody is looking at only today and tomorrow. They are not looking at day after, because nobody knows what will happen.
Understood. So I think this time around, whereas the last 2 years, it was really a problem of availability and not actually having the necessary fertilizer. Now it's a problem of affordability that is actually going to keep yields from kind of increasing back to, the levels that we saw previously. Is that right to kind of summarize in terms of a yield perspective?
It could be.
Right. So in terms of moving on to a few questions that we have got from the audience, one question was in terms of how the FX situation has been when it comes to importing fertilizer and any other raw materials in the production process. And if I can actually add within this, because there's been certain disruptions in terms of supply from Russia and Ukraine, which are the largest regions, and Belarus and that area, how have your sourcing alternatives kind of changed within the last period, and do you see that changing going forward? Mr. Baruna, if you could maybe take that question on the FX side, but also on the sourcing side.
Yeah, there are there are some restrictions, and due to Russian Federation, Belarus, and also the China has restricted the export of fertilizers. But then we have now moved into new sources. Like now we are importing from Indonesia, Egypt, and Vietnam. So those new supply sources are there. So even I think the fertilizer from Belarus coming to some destinations, and from there, and the people are importing. So it will, ultimately when the global supply chain come back to the normalcy, these things, global trade will fall in line. Yeah, true that, we have restrictions in importing from, particularly from the Russian Federation, because of the, the travel restrictions and the embargoes and so on. But there are new destinations coming in. Yeah, what is that question? But the first one I missed that.
Yeah, in terms of foreign currency liquidity, have you been able to kind of procure how much you need within the system?
Yeah, mostly, but still, some companies now, like now some of the countries still, yet to believe in these low our LCs. So maybe they ask some confirmation. So it's a kind of a 60-40 kind of situation, particularly when it comes to the new generation of fertilizers. We have that issue in opening LCs, that those restrictions are still there, but things will ease out with the country situation improving. So it may take, as Prasad explained, that I think now we are in the end of the major season and then the minor season coming. So hopefully that things will improve along with the economic situation and the next Maha. And the real recovery takes place perhaps in 2024. Like, farmers, the biggest issue today is the purchasing power of the farmer. The commodity prices too has come down, particularly the paddy prices. So I think the last major season, they put everything at, even some farmers pawned their jewelries and invested in agri. So if they don't, if they can't recover those things, then of course the things will be bad. But I think eventually, as long as people need food, I think somebody will have to produce food in this country. So eventually it will happen, but it's a bit slow process. So it may take 1 or 2 seasons to get back to the real, normal situation, because 21 we had that ban, 20 we had that COVID situation, and 22 we had that economic. So actually it's 3 bad years in a row. And now only the things are opening up, and it may take 2 or 3 seasons to get back to the normal situation.
Thanks, Mr. Varuna. There's also a question overall. I think it's kind of linked to in terms of the overall market for fertilizer in Sri Lanka annually. And I think you mentioned, Mr. Prasad, that it's possibly around 500,000 metric tons in a sustainable kind of fashion. And how much at the moment government has within its stocks. And I think the question is in terms of, is it able to supply the next season?
So I think the government has a little bit of urea and a reasonable large quantity of MOP in their stocks. MOP, say they were issuing to the farmers at 19,000 rupees a bag. So which is little too expensive for the farmers. So as a result, we have not seen uptake, even though the government is trying to issue to the farmer, the farmers are reluctant to purchase it. So they have a reasonable quantity of it in their stocks. Then regarding the urea, they have, I think, I think more than 30,000 tons in their stocks, which is left over from last season. And also, I think the government went for a tender to import another 25,000 metric tons. So, and the government is expected to issue those to the farmers at 10,000 rupees, which they did last season. So, in the paddy sector, the price for Yala private sector will not have a big, there can be small, but say government will have some quantity to issue. So regarding the TSP item, which the government promised that the last season, which was supposed to come, which didn't come, that they will get it early part of this season and they will issue. But apparently there is a question whether that will ever come. So Then again, this season also the farmers will have no, if from the NPK, they don't have P again. So I don't know. And also based on Nishanta's explanation, which is correct, the specification of TSP which they have put is too stringent, and that kind of TSP is almost not available in the world. So it is almost, if you are looking at that spec, it is almost impossible for you to import. So as a result, whether the cargo will come is a question. So paddy farmers, urea and MOP, they will get, but TSP, there is a question.
In terms of the MOP, as you mentioned that currently the price is at 90,000. Do you have an idea of what it used to be?
They are selling at 19,000 rupees to the farmer. The government issuing to the paddy farmers. But the parallelly, the world market prices have come down, and I think the commercially open market prices are lower than that. That price. So I think there was discussions going on in the government that they will reduce the price from 19,000 to 10,000. So I think they have still, I don't know whether they have announced the reduction yet. So if they don't reduce, I don't think the farmers will take the product at those levels. The farmer can buy from the open market cheaper.
Right. But in terms of the adequacy of stock from the government, they do have enough.
You cannot say enough, but based on the normal setup, because of the cash availability with the farmers, they will have not, I cannot say 100%, but reasonable quantity compared to the previous. Excluding the
right. There's also another question in terms of how much the government owes to the industry. I think if I can just kind of tie it up in terms of the industry, have you seen similar to other industries getting paid in terms of bonds? Has it been enough to settle the entire industry's dues? And is there anything more that you would be expecting going forward? Mr. Nishanta, maybe?
Of course, what I learned last day was there was 23 billion subsidy exposure to the private sector. I think more than me, Mr. Varma, will be brief on that, the receivables from the government on subsidy. Is 23 billion, I learned that it has come down to 13 billion recently. So the government has paid back. So unless otherwise you pay back this, which is due to the private sector on fertilizer imports, I don't think industry would move forward. So it's a real issue, I believe. So government should make every effort to repay, the dues for the private sector on the subsidy component. So it has to be resolved first. If you want to make available all the fertilizers for the next Yellow season. So this is my view. I think current exposure would be 13 billion, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. There's also a question in terms of any tax holidays for maybe new ventures, or if there's a lower tax rate for fertilizer companies, or what tax rate are you standing at, particularly with the changes that we've seen in taxation over the last sort of 4 months or so. Mr. Prasad?
No, there is no preferential tax. We are as normal tax rate in any corporate would pay, we have to pay. Agrochemical or fertilizer, it is as normal.
That is the 30%, right?
At
the moment.
Yeah.
There's also a question, I think, overall with the changes that have happened within the last year, whether the 3 companies that we're speaking to in terms of Agstar, CIC, as well as Lagchem, if you have seen a growth in your individual market shares within the segments that you operate in. I think I'll just open that up for anyone to answer.
Of course, we have grown, to be frank. So we have grown when compared to the last couple of years. I would say that.
Would anyone else like to respond to that, or probably not?
I think that we have not, I mean, market share has not grown, but we have been able to maintain our market share in all three pillars. Like, you know, we are into seed as well. Yeah, I mean, we have been able to maintain our market share. But when you ask about this tax regime, that local seed production is tax exempted. So that is a kind of a positive for those who are involved in the local seed production. So those productions are tax exempted. So that is something, I mean, there's a positive thing that we got from the last budget.
Understood. I think we have just one more question. If anyone has any more questions, we're just over time. There's one more question, Mr. Nishanta. I think this is a little bit specific to you. Whether the ban on glyphosate has been fully lifted, or is it restricted to particular plantation crops alone? That is tea, rubber, coconut. Is it specific to plantations?
The ban is fully lifted for all the crops. You can bring in for all the crops.
Understood. Thank you. If there are any further questions, I think we can give it about 2 minutes and maybe wrap up in a couple of minutes, if not. While we're waiting, I just have a question in terms particularly of the tea plantation segment. Of course, with the depreciation as well as volumes kind of coming off with the reduction of fertilizer usage, prices really escalated, right? But now with, I mean, the affordability wise, is there a sense that larger plantation companies can actually afford to kind of buy fertilizer at these prices and improve their volumes overall? Or is it still difficult because a large part is maybe through small tea holders and things like that? Is there a sense that even at least from the tea or certain industries or certain plantation segments kind of being able to withstand these prices and afford this kind of pricing at the moment?
Actually, even the large plantations companies, when it comes to fertilizer application, they are going slow. And also they are controlling their applications. I cannot say that they are not applying; they are applying, but very carefully, controlled. So the normal quantum of fertilizer they normally use for a year is not to be seen. So they will try to manage as much as possible, because even though the price of tea is high, the quantities are not the same. So, and also I think the lot of plantation companies in profitability terms have done well, but again, those they have cycles, so they are very cautious in application of the inputs.
Thanks, Mr. Prasad. I think with that, we can kind of bring this discussion to a close. Sorry, there's one more question that has just come in. Are there players in the market that are currently overstocked? I think because of the pricing changes that have happened. I'm not sure whether it's specific to any of you, but do you get a sense that generally there is overstocking within the market compared to how much volumes the market is able to take up?
The latest that I know, everybody together in the market, if you take fertilizer of all the items, we have only about 40,000 metric tons in Sri Lanka in total. So I cannot say that we have too much of stocks in Sri Lanka. Which is the private sector in total, and the government sector is sitting on about 69,000 metric tons of fertilizer as at now. So which is for the paddy sector. So I don't think we are having too much of stocks in Sri Lanka.
Understood. There's also a question in terms of whether the lack of fertilizer application over the past 2 years can have a more long-term impact in terms of yields of certain crops such as tea, palm oil, and rubber. Mr. Varuna, would you have any insight on that?
No, I think the coconut, there can be impact at least 1 year, up to 1 year, but others are, of course, I don't think. Now, if you apply fertilizer, it's a spontaneous, there are very quick response, except perhaps coconut. Coconut takes about 1 year to, to realize the benefit of fertilizer. But now I think with this year's application, it is the issue is not people are not applying the correct quantum of nutrients, so that is the issue. But I don't think the application, non-application will have that kind of long-term impact. I don't think so.
All right. Thank you so much to all three of you, Mr. Prasad, Mr. Varuna, as well as Mr. Nishanta, for taking the time to be with us today. And thank you everyone for participating as well and for sending those very interesting questions in. Thank you, everyone, and stay tuned. We will be having a few more webinars like this. As I mentioned, this is the first one. And as industries and sectors become more interesting in the months to come, we'll be having more as well. Thank you, everyone, for your time.